Hi, welcome to the National Entrepreneurs Association NEA Wednesday webinar series. I'm Dr. ZaLonya Allen, President of the National Entrepreneurs Association, and these Wednesday webinars are designed to bring subject matter experts on to share information that's going to help us really move the needle in our businesses. And today we have a wonderful guest speaker. It's Van Allen, entrepreneur, speaker, and author. And today we're going to be talking about leveraging the power of introverts. Van has written a new book that will be coming out this spring about introverts. And so we're going to take a deep dive and talk about all the benefits of being an introvert in terms of entrepreneurship. So, Van is a lifelong entrepreneur. He began his career in investing over 25 years ago. His primary investments include real estate and blue chip stocks, as well as numerous entrepreneurial ventures. In addition, he's an award-winning speaker and a former cable talk show host. He has received numerous awards, including first place in the District 28 World Championship of Public Speaking, put on by Toastmasters International. He attended Henry Ford Community College and Wayne State University. He's a Master NLP Practitioner, and currently he's the owner and president of Van Allen Productions, which specializes in producing video and audio projects. Hello, Van. Welcome, and thank you for joining me.
Hey, thank you for having me, and that was a great introduction. Appreciate it.
All right. So you have this wonderful book coming out. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and why you chose to write a book about introverts?
Absolutely, absolutely. As you said, I've been an entrepreneur. Oh man, ever since I was like 19 when I bought my first piece of rental property. And over the years of being an entrepreneur, I noticed that, a lot of entrepreneurs were in fact actually introverts, especially from the boot camp that we teach together. A lot of the introverts, I'm sorry, a lot of the entrepreneurs came in as introverts, and I thought, you know what, I think I could share some information that has been beneficial for me on my lifelong journey as an introvert. And I've learned some little tips and tricks and secrets that can really help you have a greater impact as an introvert. And it doesn't involve trying to pretend to be an extrovert, which is fine, but I got a system that I think people can really benefit from. So the book is designed to help those individuals that want to go to the next level in their, not only in their entrepreneurial journey, but in their personal life as well.
All right, that sounds awesome. I'm looking forward to a great conversation. And to start things off, can you give us the definition of an introvert and why does it matter?
Absolutely, absolutely. And the thing about it, Zelanya, if you ask three people what an introvert is, you're liable to get three different answers. Some people assume that being an introvert is just somebody that's shy. But that's not always necessarily the case at all, because quite often you have extroverts that are shy. But from a textbook perspective, an introvert is a person who tends to be introspective and enjoy spending time alone in solitude. Introverts gain energy through solitude and quiet rather than seeking um, um, external sources to become motivated. In fact, in this little graph here, I kind of go over some key points on being an introvert versus an extrovert and an ambivert. Now, for those of you who may not be aware of that term ambivert, that's just a term, that individual used to say that they're somewhat extrovert, somewhat introvert. But just look at that top line. I kind of go across and look at some of the similarities. An extrovert enjoys time with friends. An ambivert enjoys others, but also enjoys time alone. where the introvert enjoys spending time alone. Extroverts are typically, good talkers. They talk a lot. Ambiverts, they're good listeners and good talkers, where introverts are good listeners. But with that being said, don't kid yourself. Quite often, some of the most powerful orators are actually introverts, so they can be, great communicators and speakers as well. Extroverts are known to be outgoing, whereas the introvert is known to be somewhat reserved. Extrovert, they work well with others, whereas ambiverts tend to work alone or they can work in teams. Introverts process internally. That simply means that introverts have a knack for being able to work by themselves and spend alone time where they can take a deep dive, and that can be very beneficial for entrepreneurs, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later.
All right, great. So, can you talk about some of what you feel are strengths of entrepreneurs? The title of our conversation today is Leveraging the Power of an Introvert. So, where do you feel like that power lies? Because often there's a negative connotation attached to being an introvert.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that comes about because, we live in society that um, is geared toward extrovert behavior. And a lot of that simply comes from the fact that extroverts are outgoing, they talk and communicate a lot. So they're the person that's being heard more. So introverts are an integral part of society, a necessary part of society. And in fact, ZaLonya, as far as you asking where do they fit in terms of entrepreneurship and business, um, quite often when you start a business, you're starting out as a solopreneur, meaning that you're working alone. Introverts have a knack for being able to get in solitude and take a deep dive and do the necessary things because they don't have a team. Even if you're an extrovert, you don't necessarily have a team when you're starting in business. There's a certain amount of time that you spend as a solopreneur kind of putting things together. And this is where the introvert can excel because they can work through a lot of processes by themselves. So for sure, each one has their own strong points. Extroverts as well as introverts have strong points when it comes to operating an effective business. But we're focusing on introverts, and we'll talk further on some of the things that they bring to the table as far as really developing successful businesses.
Yeah, that's great. So, what I'm hearing is you feel like the fact that introverts like their solitude and they like to work alone, that's definitely a strength because most entrepreneurs work alone, especially when they start out. And also the analytical skills that introverts have are just great for problem solving and exploring and creating new ideas. So, can you talk a little bit about where you think or why people think that introverts are shy or have low self-esteem? Like, where does all that come from? And can you clear up some misconceptions based on your research?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I know introverts who were very powerful. In fact, I think back about my dad. He was just a lovable, outgoing person, but when he would get home, he didn't really like to, hit the streets and, as they say, get outside. He was more just family orientated, and he could, spend alone time. But he was one of the most dynamic people that I know, and so a lot of introvert people are very outgoing in their own way, very powerful in their own way. And that's just, the way they roll. It's not about being shy. You'd be surprised how many introverts are into things like the martial arts, this mixed martial arts fighting and all these things that you would think, oh, introvert does that. We've even had an introvert that was a few introverts that were the president of the United States. So that can, like I said, in answer to your question, that perception comes from society. And a lot of it, Delania, depends on the culture and society that you live in. There are certain societies that actually being an introvert is the preferred way. Um, won't name any particular, but I know in some of the Asian societies, a good example is some of these Buddhists and priests, and even like one of my favorites, Bruce Lee. I took karate when I was younger, got a black belt in karate, and I was an avid follower of Bruce Lee. And if you remember, he was a very laid back individual, but he had this certain charisma and power about him. So it depends a lot on the culture and society you in, how introversion is viewed. And we just happen to live in America where we've been led to believe that introverts quite often need fixing. And that's just not the case. We just need to discover who we are and create balance in our life and take advantage of our strengths and gifts and talents.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. And I've heard you talk about fear being one of your greatest strengths. Can you elaborate on that? What do you mean, and how can something that someone is afraid of be one of their greatest strengths?
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's kind of a double question there because in terms of fear being one of your greatest strengths, quite often your fears can tell you where you need to make improvements. Your fears can challenge you to go to the next level because I wouldn't be a speaker today if I wouldn't have faced that fear because facing your fears gives you an opportunity to grow. And that's one of the things that I share with people in the book, that quite often that thing you're afraid of could be your greatest gift. So unfortunately, people will shy away from something and figure, it's no way I'm going to do public speaking because it makes me nervous. I was nervous about public speaking as a kid, and I was somewhat shy as a kid and an introvert. And you would never get me in front of an audience. But when I started working at the Ford Motor Company, I had an opportunity to get employee involvement. And one day I had to get up and give a little presentation, and my heart was pumping out of my chest, right? But after I did it, when I sat down, it was kind of a release, like excitement. And I realized, man, I really enjoy this. And then I started realizing that it's something that's always been with me because as a youth, I would listen to great speakers like Muhammad Ali, um, John F. Kennedy, Malcolm, just anybody who was a great orator, whether it was on the radio or TV. I would sit there and watch it because your gifts and talents are something that's always with you. So yes, so understanding that means that just because you fear something, that doesn't mean that's not your gift. You may fear singing, but you may be a great singer. You may fear acting, but you may be, and a lot of that comes through in comedians. A lot of your comedians are entrepreneurs, and maybe at one time they were scared, afraid to get up on the stage and do a set, but they went on to become great comedians.
Absolutely. There's a term that's going around that I've heard a lot about lately, and it's called imposter syndrome,
Hmm.
right? And that's when someone is feeling like they're doing something, but somehow they're not authentic, and one day someone's going to discover it. And what's so crazy about that is in our boot camp, one of the assignments is to write a bio. And when I read the bios, I'm just blown away because they're so amazing. The students have all these awards, credentials, certificates, degrees, but they will say, I have imposter syndrome. So, can you talk a little bit about that? What is it? Where does it come from? And how do we overcome that?
Yeah, yeah. I also sometimes refer to it as the fear of discovery. That man, somebody's gonna, and I think introverts can run into that a lot because when you go out to a party and you try to put on, pretend to be an extrovert or whatever, deep down inside you're thinking, man, if I talk to somebody too long or stick around too long, they're gonna figure out, I'm an introvert. But that's something you don't you don't need to, we'll get into that a little later, you don't need to worry about, but getting to that whole imposter syndrome piece, I take it serious, but snicker in terms of it's a fallacy to me because I'll give you a good example. I used to ride down this one particular street coming home from my mom's house, and there would be this guy on the corner. He'd be, busting all these Michael Jackson moves, and he'd have on a Michael Jackson jacket and everything, trying to dance like Michael Jackson. And I wouldn't see him for a week or two. The next time I would see him, he'd be back on the corner, and his moves would be a little slicker, a little faster to spin and that. And about the third time I saw this guy, I actually stopped and watched him. And I said, man, this guy is good. He's got the moves down. Now somebody would see that and say, he's a cheat, a fraud, an imposter. He's copying Michael and that. But then I thought about that and I said, okay, so he was modeling himself after Michael Jackson, but now he can actually dance at this level. So you have to ask yourself the question, is that an imposter or does he actually have the skill? So when I think about people who say they have imposter syndrome, the first thing I ask them, well, the thing you supposedly faking, frauding, or being an imposter, are you good at it? They say, well, yeah, I got promoted at work. Or, yeah, it made me some money, but I'm afraid. And I say, hold it right there. If you're good at it, that's like if somebody follows along with Larry Bird, a great free throw shooter, practice, learn how to shoot 20 free throws in a row. Are they an imposter or they actually have that skill? So to me, ZaLonya, it's hard to say an imposter when you have the skills, the credentials. Some people even have, as you said, certificate degrees in that. So are you an imposter or are you the real deal? So you have to be able to accept that.
Yes. And what that says to me is that there's something going on subconsciously. There's a subconscious program that no matter what you do, there's a voice that's going to say you're not good enough, or you're not smart enough, or you're not really an expert. And one day people are going to find out. So let's talk about some techniques as far as how you deal with that. If you have that voice in your head, if you have that subconscious program that no matter what you do, it's telling you you're not adequate, how do you overcome that?
Well, one of the things, ZaLonya, we talked about that before, we live in a society that's high on validation. And the reason I say that is because quite often we can do 10 positive things, but then if somebody says one negative thing about our performance, about something we did, we take that and we take it to heart and we make that bigger than the 10 positive things we did. So what we have to do is to be able to, one technique is to go internal and recognize what you're good at and give yourself credit for that. And when you're good at something. And it's not being pompous, arrogant, or cocky to admit that you're good at something. In fact, it's very beneficial. Like, hey, I know I'm good at public speaking. I know I'm good at video production. And it's not about being cocky or arrogant. It's about giving myself credit for what I'm good at. So I'm not an imposter because I actually can get the job done. I actually can sit down and edit, a 1 hour video. If you can do what you need to do and you can do it efficiently, then you're not an imposter. As far as some of the other techniques you can use, ZaLonya, is meditation. Visualize yourself doing what you're doing and doing it well, and visualize, people, giving you accolades, if that's, validation helps to, make your whole concept stronger of self. But those are just some of the things you can do. Positive affirmations, write down, make a list of all your positive attributes and look at them. And when you do that, it's a funny thing. You'll recognize that you'll write down way more positive attributes than you will things that you don't like about yourself. And it could just be simple things, but those are a couple of things that you can do to develop greater confidence when it comes to believing in yourself and your skills and abilities.
Right. And I really like the idea of writing down your strengths because I think so often we forget about those. And then one thing goes wrong and we focus on that. And sometimes we're really good at something, so we take it for granted because it comes natural to us, and other people are just wowed by it. So it's really powerful to write down your strengths and remind yourself of those things when you're having a bad day. But one more thing that I think is really effective is having positive role models,
Hmm.
people who you feel some sort of connection to, who've overcome their challenges and achieved success. So, can you talk a little bit about some of the successful entrepreneurs who have admitted that they're kind of an introvert?
Absolutely. And yeah, you bring up a great point about having, role models around you, people that are effective in helping you to recognize your strengths and abilities as opposed to focusing on what's wrong with you or the negative things. But in terms of people who are famous that are powerful, effective entrepreneurs, you got people like Steven Spielberg, one of the greatest, movie makers in my mind. He did E.T. and one of my all-time favorite movies, and just the skill and talent. Barack Obama, Bill Gates. Now, there's one quick story I like to share with you on on an introvert, fellow named Chris. Okay, many years ago, I used to love to go to Las Vegas. Not that I'm a gambler, I just used to like to go there and, go to some of the different shows. So I used to love the magician. So I went to this one magic show, and it was a small venue. And before the show started, I told the usher, "Hey, I got to go to the back room, the bathroom." He said, "Okay, just head behind the stage, behind the curtain." I thought that was kind of weird. So I went behind the curtain, and there was a small frame black guy sitting on a chest. And I said, "Hey, my man, is it the bathroom back here?" And he pointed to the back, didn't say anything. Went to the bathroom, and I came out. He was still sitting there. I said, "Hey, you in a show or something? I see you backstage just chilling." He said, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." Real soft-spoken voice. I said, "Well, what's your name?" He said, "Chris." Chris, okay, all right. I said, "Well, I'll be looking forward to seeing you." So went back and sat out front. He came out, he opened for the musician, and he killed it. And to the extent where I said, "Man, that doesn't seem like the same guy that was sitting backstage on the chest all laid back." Turn out a few years later, this guy popped up in one of my favorite movies, a movie called New Jack City. Turn out this guy was Chris Rock, the comedian. And
Wow.
I said, "Wow." Now Chris Rock is one of the top 10 comedians, let's say, in the country or world right now. And if you really pay attention and look and watch the way he moves, and that he's actually an introvert. And if you ask him, he'll tell you, but when it comes time to excel and do what he needs to do, he does it because he's good at his craft. And if you notice, all those people I mentioned, Barack Obama, great communicator, great orator; Steven Spielberg, great storyteller; Bill Gates, great businessman. The list goes on and on. So that's the key as an introvert. Figure out what it is you're good at and perfect that and take it to the next level.
All right, that's an amazing story about Chris Rock, and I've heard that about him before. I've heard similar stories about Usher Raymond, the musician, Johnny Carson.
Yep. Mhm.
So that's incredible. So I want to start to wrap things up here, but as we wrap, can you kind of just put a button on everything and talk about what we can expect from your book? Maybe information that we haven't heard before, or how it's going to help people and really make a difference in their lives and their business.
Absolutely. One of the things I like to share that introverts can begin to use in order to, make some transitions as far as how they, view themselves as introverts. For one, I said, don't get out of the notion that you need fixing. What we need is more balance. You want to create more balance in your life. You don't want to try to pretend that you're something that you're not, trying to pretend to be an extrovert is already setting yourself up for failure, because if you're not an extrovert, you don't even know what that feels like. So how can you pretend if you don't know the internal feeling of that? But you know what it's like to be an introvert. You know what it's like to be good at something. You know how that feels, and start to be proud of it. So one of the things that we can do is to start practicing stretching ourselves. That's the key to growing as an introvert. And what I mean by stretch is that, I always use this example of the rubber band. This is a rubber band here. If I continue to stretch this rubber band and I do it consistently, eventually it won't shrink back down to this state. And I like to, give an example of that by this top. I just put a rubber band, same type of rubber band, different color. I stretched it and I put it on this top. If I leave this on this top for a couple of weeks, when I take it off, it's no longer going to be the size of this particular rubber band, because it's been stretched. Like the mind stretched to a new idea, never returns to the original position. And a quick story I always share with people. Many years ago, there was this toy out, and ZaLonya, I don't know if you remember it. It was called Stretch Armstrong. It was a little doll, and it was made out of this material that when you stretched it, you could stretch, take each arm and stretch it, and it would stretch out. But when you let it go, it would return to the original position. And you could take one arm and a leg and stretch it, let it go, it turned to the original position. Okay, so I got one of those for Christmas, a birthday gift or something. And after about a couple of months of having it, I would stretch it, and eventually it wouldn't go back to the original position. It would stay partially stretched out, and I didn't realize it at the time, but as introverts, as humans, that's actually good for us to stretch ourselves until we don't go back to the original lack and limitations, the original negative concepts about ourselves, the original negative beliefs that we have about ourselves, and continue to stay stretched and expanded. But the only way you're going to do that is to be consistent and to constantly continue to stretch yourself. And the way to do that is to pick areas in your life that you know you need to grow in, things that you may have some inner fears or about, that you feel like they make you nervous or anxious or whatever, and just put yourself in a position where you do those things on a regular basis. And over time, you will begin to make those transitions and make some improvements that will not only help you in your entrepreneurial life and your personal life. And listen, let me give one quick example. If you know that you're an entrepreneur and you don't like to network, develop some networking strategies, and then consistently go out and execute those strategies, and think more about the mission, the purpose, not so much about results. Sometimes we get caught up in results. So just get out there and network, and over time you become more comfortable with it. And that's kind of what you want to do, going through life. So.
All right, awesome. I like that idea of stretching, because growth can't happen in your comfort zone. So you just have to take a chance and get out there and stretch. So I can't believe it, but we are out of time. So that concludes this session of Wednesday webinar. And thank you guys for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, ZaLonya.